Hello and welcome to our virtual Lunch and Learn. Today we're talking about addressing plant cyber risk. My name is Rachel Green and I'm the Digital Communications Specialist here at McNaughton-McKay Electric Company. Presenting for us today will be Chad Humphreys, Network and Security Solutions Consultant with Rockwell Automation. Chad is joining us from Dallas, Texas today. Ready to answer your questions out in the comments also today is Janie West, Solutions Architect with McNaughton-McKay. Feel free to enter your questions in the comments as we go along, and we'll have a Q&A portion at the end for Chad to answer those in more depth as well. We'll be getting started shortly, but we'd like to allow a few minutes for attendees to join us here. As you come in, let us know where you're tuning in from in the comments. I see we have Leanne from Findlay, Ohio. Thanks for joining. You can view recordings of previous virtual Lunch and Learns on our YouTube channel under the Virtual Lunch and Learn playlist. And we cover a new topic every Wednesday at noon, so be sure to join us on your lunch break. For anyone just coming in, welcome to our virtual Lunch and Learn today, addressing plant cyber risk. Let us know where you're joining us from in the comment section. Feel free to type any questions as you have them in the comments while our presenter, Chad Humphreys, Rockwell Automation, talks to us about changes in industry standards as they relate to cybersecurity and cyber risks for your plant. Our specialist, Janie West, is available to chat with you in the comment section, and Chad will be available to answer your questions during the Q&A segment at the end of the presentation. If you'd like to reach out afterward, or if you have further questions, you can send us an email at ncmclive@nc-mc.com. Please be sure to let us know the session you attended. We'll have that email address on the screen for you at the end as well. All right, let's go ahead and get started today. Chad, pass it over to you.
All right, thank you, Rachel, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining in today. As Rachel mentioned, my name is Chad Humphreys. I work for Rockwell Automation. I'm a network and cybersecurity solution consultant. I'm one of a half a dozen resources in this particular role nationwide, and as Rachel mentioned, I'm based in Dallas, Texas. Today, what we're going to talk about are concepts around OT data regulation, cybersecurity standards, and give you some insight as to how to develop a strategy, right? I think the first place that we should really start this conversation is around Wall Street and the White House, right? Environmental and social governance is becoming a widely discussed topic. And the idea behind this is that can improving plant cyber hygiene positively influence shareholder investment decisions? The answer is very likely yes. When you look at an ESG numerical rating, it influences shareholder decisions. So the point is improving plant cyber hygiene helps lower the likelihood of health, safety, and environmental events, which again influences an ESG rating in a positive manner. So there's a lot of information that can be captured out there. And when you think about that breakdown of environmental and social governance, think of the social aspect as being how facilities are regularly inspected and ensures that they're safe to work in, right? Another high-level focus area would be around government regulations. There's actually quite a bit of information that you can capture already in social media and places like YouTube. The G7 Summit for a number of years has been talking about cybersecurity and making it a core focus. There's even some videos out there right now where former President Barack Obama addressed the G7 Summit and addressed a lot of the vulnerabilities that exist in the United States, just to let people understand the threat landscape that exists out there and the vulnerabilities that we know that we have in the U.S. specifically. And a lot of the government regulations are really designed to address long neglected operational technology vulnerabilities. And I think one of the most important questions that we can really ask, top down, all levels of the organization, whether it be corporate or plant level, is who owns the operational risk? We ideally, if you abide by some of the standards that we're going to talk about today, those standards are written and designed to empower those that own operational risk, right? Because it's about keeping people, our environment, and our process safe, right? So when you look at a lot of these government regulations, we're systematically seeing regulations roll out, policies released, executive orders, et cetera. And it's happening through specific agencies that are designed to address specific vertical markets. So as listed on the screen, you'll see NERC. So this is the North American Electrical Reliability Council for Critical Infrastructure Protection. They have about a dozen cybersecurity policies in place, and this is specific to the power utility industry. Next would be the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. This is geared toward the energy industry, of course, and a lot of the policies and the legislation that are being written right now are related to supply chain attack vulnerabilities and how to mitigate those strategies. You've also probably heard of the next one, which would be the Department of Homeland Security. They work in close partnership with the Transportation Safety Administration. There are certainly notable orders being released, like Executive Order 14028 that was released in May and has follow-up addendums to it coming later this year. But that is specifically to address the vulnerabilities that exist, as an example, with energy pipeline infrastructure. Certainly, the Environmental Protection Agency, moving on next, they have policies around cybersecurity relative to the water industry. And lastly, I would mention, of course, the Food and Drug Administration. Especially the healthcare portion of that is becoming heavily regulated, as well as food. But there's quite a bit of information out there. And I would encourage all that are interested in understanding what policies and procedures, just go to these specific agencies and capture information. The last thing I'll touch on with this slide is the CIA data triad model. And just to illustrate a point that and we're going to touch on this a little bit more in the presentation, but 3 of the most common cyber attack propagation methods can easily be related to this pictorial. So when we think of confidentiality, think of ransomware, right? This is where hackers are stealing what we call plain text data protocol, and they are then encrypting it themselves. So when we think about confidentiality, think about data encryption. And when we think about the production environments, we're oftentimes, what has been available to us is what we call plain text data, right? So we are insecure by design, and we are prime targets for hackers to extort money out of us via ransomware. The next would be data integrity, which we often think of as data authenticity. A good way to think of this would be attacks such as like a man-in-the-middle attack, where the goal of the hacker is not necessarily extortion. The goal of the attack is havoc, right? So they're trying to get up there and disrupt what we call application layer data. And so the last availability you could think, of course, as a denial of service or a distributed denial of service. In these instances, hackers try and gain access to your environment and overwhelm your systems and disrupt the availability of your process environment. Apologies, folks, looking just 1 moment. Okay, so moving along, cyber attack statistics. So there is a company, or there's a website you can actually visit. I found it really insightful. If you look at the top of your screen here, it's called visualcapitalist.com, right? And so they captured some statistics via a spec ops software. If you're not familiar, spec ops software is used primarily as an access control software utility. And so what it really does is it pairs with tools like Active Directory, and it manages access control privileges. But long story short, it's widely adopted. And as a result, we were able to capture some great intel about attacks that have been propagated between 2006 and 2020. And if you notice right here on the screen, it says it defines significant as attacks that affected government agencies, defense, high-tech companies, and crimes that were in excess of $1 million as far as the quantitative impacts, right? So I think a picture, definitely speaks 1,000 words. In this case, you could easily see that the United States has been targeted and victimized far more than any part of the world. Right? The closest to us is second would be the United Kingdom, right? But again, we are in the United States at a point where we are a prime focus of all the wrong people. So this makes it all the more important that we do our part to protect our people and our process and develop a strategy around cybersecurity. Apologize, folks. Give it just one moment. Okay, so cyber risks and threats. So we know that 50% of the time, breaches took minutes to compromise, months to discover, and weeks to contain, right? As far as how attacks are propagated, they typically are propagated in one of three ways, either inside or outside, intentional or unintentional, and organized or unorganized. We on the screen you'll see here we have examples. One being what we like to call the sneaker attack, right? So this creates a scenario where someone could just use, say, a thumb drive with malware inside that the code base inside that thumb drive, and they can then plug it into any open terminal. When we think about the production environment, oftentimes we don't do an adequate job of blocking port access on machines. And so if an attacker has access to your environment, we know statistically that 25% of the times hacks happen internally, whether intentional or not. So the point is that we ought to take a very close look at port access management, monitoring the use control privileges of our environments. Again, we see insider threats. Especially in pandemic times, we're dealing with people that are coming into our production environments, and there's a certain element of trust that has to be there. And also there should be some terms and conditions around remote access sessions or contractors having access, whether logically or physically, to the production environment. Okay, so let's talk about a modernization strategy at a high level. So the most important things that we could do is adopt a standard and abide by government regulations. Like I said earlier, we are rapidly as a nation becoming more and more regulated as it pertains to cybersecurity. And an example of this would be Executive Order 14028. We already have customers who are scrambling to get in compliance. They've already been given notice by the government that their vulnerabilities are not in compliance with regulations, and they are facing notice of penalties, and they are scrambling to get into compliance. So this is our reality. It's here. It's real, right? And I like the quote of old Ben Franklin of, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, because that's unfortunately where we are at. You could also look at the Senate bill infrastructure package. This was published about a month ago. The current federal level Senate bill infrastructure package has 1.9 billion in allocations to it. So that should help tell us all the gravity of the seriousness of this and the vulnerabilities that we have as a nation. So the second phase of this, of course, is we need to focus on writing the ideal policies and procedures around data. And those are in the form of what IEC 62443 standards would call cybersecurity requirement specifications. And if you write the ideal policies and develop a phased approach, then you should be able to architect robust cybersecurity management systems, right? And what is also recommended, and in some cases even required, if you look at the terms and conditions as an example of Executive Order 14028, thou shalt have a compliance manager on the payroll who works in close cadence with the Department of Homeland Security and Transportation Safety Administration. So again, we are rapidly becoming more and more regulated. And the regulations are very strict, and the reporting cycles we're seeing where if it's a perceived vulnerability, it has to be disclosed within days of discovery. If it's a cyber attack, same story. The last portion of this is that we really need to understand the IACS, Industrial Automation Control System data standards. The big ones right now, again, are IEC 62443, NIST 800-82. These are fantastic places for any company looking to develop a strategy around this. These would be wonderful starting points for you. And another thing to consider is when we look at the way that these standards are written, what it requires of us is to look at every device, every software application running in our environment, and adopt a security lifecycle strategy. And we're going to touch on that a little bit more, but the most important thing we can do, given the sensitivity of our environments, is we must always have application layer visibility of data. Now, I'm not going to go too far into today on what we call the open systems interconnection model, but for those that are interested and less informed, I would strongly encourage you to become familiar with that model. It's a 7-layer model, and the short takeaway on it is that the upper 3 layers of that model, layers 5, 6, and 7, are critically important to production. They represent the largest points of attack and ingress for hackers. And if we can do a good job of protecting layers 5, 6, and 7 of the OSI model, the Open Systems Interconnection model, then we're doing ourselves a service. Okay, so again, when we look at the White House's response to cyber policies, they really identified 5 best practices. And mind you, these aren't necessarily completely specific to industrial production environments, but they do involve multi-factor authentication, threat detection, threat response. I'm going to touch on what we call the 7 foundational requirements of data security as prescribed by IEC 62443. And I would encourage you to, when you think about policies or you think about cyber attacks, to always use these 7 as the points that everything pivots off of. You can really simplify this, demystify this whole concept of industrial cybersecurity. We always keep those 7 foundational requirements in mind. And certainly on this page, there's some great advice as well about network segmentation. Sadly, we do still see scenarios where networks in production environments that have people walking around, they're not properly segmented, and these represent ways that hackers could easily cause a disruption in those environments. And when you think about okay, well, someone compromises my data, what does that actually mean? Think about it this way. If you are a customer that has motion axes, and typically those motion axes, maybe it's a conveyor belt system feeding another conveyor belt system. It's about your process and time synchronization and machines being in the right place, right time. So if someone disrupts hacks your system, they have the ability to then disrupt your process, and especially in terms of time synchronization. So to say that production environments, even if they become hacked, don't represent catastrophic events where people can get hurt is absolutely not true. We need to take these things very seriously, especially with the environments and the requirements that production environments have. Okay, so there are several regulatory standards out there. Highlighted the top 4 today. Just to kind of give you some perspective, I would say that these are some of the most widely adopted around the world. The first would be the International Society of Automation and the Inter-Electrotechnical Commission, 62443. There's a lot of great information here. This is actually where I have most of my background certifications with. And to me, it represents a great starting point for any company trying to develop a pragmatic approach to data security. NIST 882, again, we're talking about data security in the context of how do we really improve performance and reliability and safety of our environment. So when you're looking at, for example, safety instrumentation systems, NIST 882 would be a great reference to, hey, what can I do to better secure not only my overall environment, but especially my safety systems as well. Okay, so again, I mentioned earlier these 7 foundational requirements for data security, and these are a personal favorite for me. I actually conduct a lot of training classes here at Rockwell for our own resources and even customers. And again, I would challenge you to think of these as the starting point. If we're going to rationalize what technologies are out there, what we should adopt, or really how we should look at our environment or look at our vulnerabilities, or even what shows up in the headline news about how cyber attacks were propagated. The argument could be made that one or more of these foundational requirements was not adequately designed within the production environment. So the first being identification and authentication control, are more commonly referred to as access control. The second would be use control. This has to do with concepts like least privilege. Give employees access to systems that are relevant to their job profile. Role-based access management. What is their role? What systems do they need to have access to, and to what extent? System integrity, this has a lot to do with data authenticity. Remember, I said earlier, what we really need in production environments are not only purpose-built tools, but application layer visibility of data, because that is where hackers will, again, try to disrupt the authenticity of data. One such commonly discussed example would be the Stuxnet hack that happened years ago. So hackers disrupted the safe state operation of nuclear uranium centrifuges at a power plant in Iran, and they did so via by disrupting the Modbus protocols that were in that environment. They basically introduced malicious Modbus and disrupted the application layer content within the data, and so that's defined as disrupting the integrity of the data, the authenticity of the data. Data confidentiality, this is encryption, right? So we kind of touched on ransomware earlier. Restricting data flow, think of examples would be network segmentation. Another common area that we run into challenges with is clear lines of demarcation between corporate IT environments and production environments. We live in a day and age where connected enterprise is a top priority for most of the Fortune 500 companies out there and others. But we need to develop pragmatic ways of sharing information between connected enterprise environments and production environments that do not increase our attack surface. And the way that we do that is by restricting that data flow and providing a shared data destination point, such as an industrial demilitarized zone. So the next on the list would be, of course, timely response to events. There's more than one way to say this. Another common way to phrase this would be change management, intrusion detection. There are plenty of tools out there. We partner with some fantastic companies, two of which come to mind. Of course, Cisco. They offer a tool called CyberVision. Clarity would be another. Again, these are tools that give you instant visibility into your what we call CVEs, your common vulnerabilities and exposures. And in the case of Clarity, especially in Cisco, they give us what we need in terms of application layer visibility of data in production environments. Resource availability, this has to do with how we configure software applications as well as hardware. Examples of this would be implementing quality of service designations on Ethernet switches to prioritize traffic from critical systems over less critical systems. So whether it be a VFD network, an HMI network, a safety network, we have the ability to go into, say, our network switch infrastructure and say traffic from these specific assets is more important than others, and we want to mitigate any data packet loss from these systems. And another area of consideration around resource availability would be what we call the IEEE 1588 standard, and this has to do with time synchronization in production environments. How do we ensure that when we have a deterministic sensitive network and machines that are working in unison, how do we ensure that we mitigate any network associated latency or jitter that might otherwise disrupt machines being, again, if it's a motion application, in the right place, right time. And when you give the summation of all of these, what we're trying to define, especially during design and implementation, we have to define what is our security level target, because we have to factor each of these specific areas by every device, every application in our environment. And again, just to emphasize, it's really important at all levels of an organization that we understand the differences between corporate IT data, and production data. Although we're using some of the same technologies, the way in which we use these is very different. In production environments, the top priority is safe state operation of the process. So availability is, we think of that data triad that I showed earlier in the presentation. So in production environments, it's about availability, then data authenticity or integrity, and then confidentiality. And it's the inverse in the corporate environment. So we are constantly searching for ways in production environments to protect our people and our process, and we do that through ensuring the safe state operation and availability and authenticity of the data in our environment first. So this is again why I say application layer visibility of data is so important in production environments. Okay, when we look at this next slide, I'd actually really like to draw your attention to the lower portion of it, where we deal with assessments, design, implementation, and monitoring. This is also commonly referred to as the security lifecycle. So for those of you that are wondering, okay, so where do I get started with all of this? Well, the first thing that we should really do is start with an assessment. We can't protect what we can't see, and if we don't know our install base, then there's even greater cause for concern. So the first thing that we could do in rolling out a strategy is start with an assessment, and then phase 2 of that would be design and implementation. And part of that design and implementation process is the first step is writing the ideal policies at the corporate level around cybersecurity, around, again, those 7 foundational requirements that we just discussed. And then we look at every device, every application, and before we roll things out into a production environment, we do cyber factory acceptance testing and site acceptance testing before we, hand things over and go live in a production environment. But the vernacular that is used in NIST and even in IEC 62443 is well defined right here. So if it's 62443, the life cycle is defined as 3 legs. The first being assess, design, implement is phase 2, and then 3 is your maintenance or monitoring strategy. If we're talking NIST, the idea is to look at the attack continuum in terms of before, during, and after. But in some respects, we're speaking the same language, right? Know what's out there, know how to protect it, and know what to look for and how to maintain it. When you look at Rockwell Automation specifically, we have a variety of tools that we offer to meet the needs of industry standards and regulations. And we're trying to encourage our customers to get behind the idea of adopting a standard. Pick one that is relevant to your vertical market, pay close attention to regulations that exist for your vertical market specifically. And again, look at the tools that are available to you to help you meet compliance standards. And if you, again, I like to position things off of those 7 foundational requirements. If you look at those in terms of every device, every application, then you're going to find that the tools that you see here on your screen help you enforce those policies and procedures on a device level and on a software level. So if we're talking as an example, FactoryTalk Asset Center, that is a tool that among the features and the many features in it, from a data security perspective, will give you the ability to assign access control privileges to plant personnel. It'll give you the ability to assign role-based access management, control user privileges. Even in some cases, it's certainly designed for your maintenance strategy in terms of doing change management and disaster recovery as well. The Stratix 5950, that's an industrial security appliance. I strongly would encourage people that especially use a security appliance like that as a barrier device between the corporate environment and your production environment, because as that device permits or denies traffic, the traffic that is permitted, you have the ability to interrogate that traffic right down to the application layer. And that is so important because oftentimes data that is coming from corporate environments and the production environments has not properly been interrogated. But the Stratix 5950 is a fantastic tool that will give you the ability to interrogate data down to its application core. And again, that is critical to production environments. I touched on Clarity earlier. This is, again, Cisco Cyber Vision as well. These are fantastic, lightweight, purpose-built tools. These are not tools that have existed for years to support commercial enterprise IT environments. These are purpose-built tools for production environments They are designed to support the sensitive needs of deterministic production networks. In other words, you don't have to worry about deploying these solutions in your industrial data center and having them scan your environment and worry about any network latency or jitter issues that may result in that. These are perfect, purpose-built, lightweight solutions designed for industrial that give you increased visibility of your environment in real time, all the time. Okay, so when we talk about coming up with a strategy and in enforcing countermeasures, this is part of a wider term that you've probably heard of before called defense in depth. And when we talk about defense in depth, what we're talking about essentially is a layered approach to thwart the ability of what we call a threat actor or a hacker of compromising your environment. So we're talking about how do we physically, first, how do we write the right policies? Second, how do we physically and logically secure our environment? And this starts with every device, every application, every engineering workstation, look at the network, even look at, when we think of access control, which I touched on earlier, that's foundational requirement number one. We can't look at that only in terms of logical. It has physical ramifications too. And in scenarios where it may not be feasible or practical to logically secure data in a production environment, maybe it's a safety system. If we can't logically secure it, we need to physically secure it. And if one or neither of those are feasible, we need application layer visibility via intrusion detection tools like Clarity and Cisco CyberVision. But again, to summarize this slide, this is about independent layered approaches that make it difficult for a cyber hacker to carry out their crime, and ideally it'll delay their ability to execute their attack and give the plant operator time to react to this and restore their operation to a safe state. So when you break down the elements of IEC 62443, there's really four main areas: general policies and procedures, systems, and products. Again, for those that are interested, I would strongly encourage you to get informed about these. Getting back to how policies and executive orders and government regulations are being written, they're oftentimes, working in parallel with the International Society of Automation, the Electrotechnical Commission. And so what you see here is what our powers that be at a federal level are also looking at. This is the lens by which they are looking at. So even here at Rockwell Automation, the components that we use and the products that we manufacture, and even the supply chain side of it and how we produce products, we abide by IEC 62443 standards, a couple of which would be 4-1 and 4-2. So we are trying to give our customers peace of mind that the components that we use and the manner in which that we build our solutions are safe and secure for product quality control. Okay. As an example of the many tools that we offer here at Rockwell, FactoryTalk Security. This is an application or a software application that you can deploy in your industrial data center, and you should have peace of mind that this is a tool that is going to protect your products and your overall system. So again, when we think of those 7 foundational requirements and how FactoryTalk Security is supporting those, think of again. Access control, user control privileges. We also have purpose-built protocols. We have Ethernet IP and what we call the Common Industrial Protocol. We have SIP security. This is a purpose-built protocol that is designed to allow end customers the ability to encrypt data in their production environment. So if you look at FactoryTalk Security and the tools that work in parallel with FactoryTalk Security, like FactoryTalk Policy Manager, these are tools that will give you the ability to enable what we call SIP security or data encryption, or we have SIP sync, which is oriented toward time synchronization. So we talked about that 7th foundational requirement about resource availability and optimizing our process. There are purpose-built protocols for allowing you to time synchronize your environment. That's SIP sync. We also have SIP motion. Similar story. Both of those abide to what we call the IEEE 1588 standard. Okay, so this is what we call our Rockwell Automation's Converged Plantwide Ethernet strategy. What this represents is it loosely mimics what we call the Purdue model, and it represents a major investment collaboration, if you will, between Cisco, Panduit, and Rockwell Automation. And so what we're trying to do is not only align with the standard, but give our customers purpose-built tools for their environment. So you can actually go to our website right now, and we have a series of white papers that you can capture that will show you, these white papers are based on lab simulated feedback. We architected networks in a lab environment, and we did resiliency testing, convergence testing to see, hey, how are these systems going to react, and to give our customers peace of mind that if you invest in our solutions, you know what you're getting, right? You know what you're getting in terms of reliability and performance. And we are doing, again, our best as a company to abide by industry standards. So the tools that we offer are designed to give you the ability to say, yes, we have invested with Rockwell Automation, we have invested in their tools, and we have constructed and deployed our systems in a manner that that is in compliance with 62443, NIST 882, so that you don't at some point get what we call a notice of penalty from our government. Again, there's quite a few tools and there's a lot of information in the slide today. I really don't plan to go into the detail on every one of them, but I would just encourage all of you, when you look at the tools that are available, that and how they support those 7 foundational requirements. Of course, we all know Active Directory. That's a tool designed for access control and use control privileges. And so FactoryTalk Network Manager, it's a similar story for all your Ethernet components. So like our Stratix Ethernet switches or Cisco, you can use a tool like FactoryTalk Network Manager to manage access control, use control, even thinking of resource availability. You can use a tool like FactoryTalk Network Manager to think of it as a single point of entry or a single pane of glass to see all your network assets in your production environment and enforce those 7 foundational requirements that I touched on. Okay, here's a longer listing of a lot of the tools that we offer. And again, we talk about the security lifecycle being assessments, design, implementation, and maintenance. The tools that we offer are designed, some of the software tools that we design for sure are designed to help you bolster your maintenance strategy. So Asset Center, change management, disaster recovery, right? Change detection, or even, like I said, FactoryTalk Network Manager, even, backing up systems, FactoryTalk Vault. Okay, so when we talk about the capabilities that we're offering here at Rockwell Automation, we have, of course, a global presence, but in terms of security lifecycle services, we offer, beginning to end. So it will always be predicated on, what makes sense for you, what type of partnership support for Rockwell Automation helps complement your business. So we can be there to help you write the ideal policies. We can be there to help assess your environment, help you design and implement your cybersecurity management system, and even maintain it. So we have facilities all over the world providing 24/7, what we call follow the sun support, right? So over 600 resources available to you as well. So again, to just summarize this, install base evaluations, discovery of your environment, security posture surveys, network assessments, asset inventory identification, modernization planning, and even quality of service, patch management. We can be your trusted partner and source for this. And that concludes my presentation for today. And I want to thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, please reach out to the team at Mac and Mac. They have full access to resources like myself. I'm more than happy to come and visit with you and learn more about your priorities and lend support. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much, Chad. That was a wonderful presentation, very useful information, and so relevant today in our world. We don't have any live questions in the chat at this moment, but we want to give folks an opportunity to plug those in as they have them. One of the questions that our customers might be asking, and maybe you can cover for us, is where do I start with all of this?
Sure. So the ideal place to start is with an assessment, or commonly referred to as an install-based evaluation. Risk assessment, there's more than one way to say it. If at first you don't know your environment, that's square one. Another would be capturing any information from corporate IT. Are there any policies and procedure documents such as a cybersecurity requirement specification? If there are, then that leads to a scenario where plant and corporate are communicating, and there needs to be a consensus about what tools are in place to for a cybersecurity management system. So one would be have an assessment done. Two would be talk to your corporate team. Three would be be informed on industry standards, and even be informed about government regulations that are specific to your vertical market. And if you're an energy operator, I would strongly encourage you, as an example, to follow information that is provided online about the Federal Energy Reliability Council, or even the Department of Homeland Security and the Transportation Safety Administration. They are continuously writing cybersecurity executive orders and policies specific by vertical market. So if you're NERC-CIP, think of going there for if you're in the power utility industry. EPA for water, Food and Drug Administration for food and beverage and healthcare. And the last on this would be, and this is in some respects becoming a requirement. If you look at Executive Order 14028, the normative statement in there, or the thou shalt, if you will, is to designate a compliance manager within your organization that is going to be in regular cadence with the government regulatory body. And as an example, with this executive order, that compliance manager has to keep in close cadence with the Department of Homeland Security and the Transportation and Safety Administration.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Another question that managers and administrators might be asking is this really worth the investment?
I would say this is subjective, but I think given, yes, and I'll base that on the high threat landscape that exists in modern times. And so we are now dealing with scenarios with what we call as hacking as a service, or even more specifically, I'll cite an example of a company called or an organization rather, called Lockbit. They are offering ransomware as a service. And so they are a huge threat to production environments, because we oftentimes are plagued with data traversing in our environment that is insecure. It's not encrypted. And for ransomware as a service type companies like Lockbit, industrial production, we represent the ideal target for those types of hackers. There's even a search engine that comes to mind that's been out for a number of years called Shodan. It's a search engine that that people can simply plug in common part numbers for manufacturers and see network-facing devices that are in production environments. This is it should never come to this point where an average person should be able to go to an online search engine and see assets that are associated with power plants or water treatment facilities around the world. Yet it happens, and it's a large concern. So is it worth it? Well, consider what an hour worth of downtime would cost your organization if a hack were propagated. So there are certainly quantitative and qualitative impacts to take into consideration. But on a baseline level, just ask yourself, what would an hour worth of downtime cost your organization if your environment was hacked and compromised?
That leads us into another question that I think is probably heavy on the minds of a lot of our customers out there, but what would the consequences be if I do get hacked? What happens?
For sure. I would say the most severe would be loss of life. This has actually happened at least once before, from my understanding, at a hospital in Germany. And I've also, heard of challenges in the upstream drilling space around this as well. But we have to keep in mind that, if a hacker reaches our environment and they change, logics configurations, disrupt, the way that machines operate, the consequences can absolutely entail health, safety, and environmental occurrences. And so loss of life, health, safety, environmental occurrences would be top of the list. Certainly there's, like I said, production downtime that can be associated with this, loss of intellectual property, and again, just the long-term high qualitative and quantitative impacts. When we look at companies like Colonial Pipeline, they paid $4.4 million in ransomware earlier this year to hackers, or JBS, the meat packing company here in the U.S., they paid $11 million in ransomware earlier this year. So we have to just kind of look at those variables and understand that oftentimes the quantitative impact is really hard to measure because it has long-term implications.
Wonderful. We do have one question from the audience I want to get in here to you. The question is, can this be applied to factory power stations?
Cybersecurity, certainly. When you think of the tools that are available in your environment, it probably warrants a deeper discussion. But I would say certainly there are purpose-built tools designed for power applications as well. What we're talking about is data in a production environment. If an asset has the ability to be networked, then it needs to be closely monitored, and we need to look at what data we permit or deny to that machine. So the short answer is yes, and would love to have a deeper discussion, potentially long term, if you're receptive. So.
Great. Great. Well, thank you, Chad, so much for this wonderful information and insight. Thank you to Jamie for being our resource out in the comment section here today. And thank you to all of our live viewers for your time. We hope this session was informative and engaging for you. Remember, you can always reach out to us at the email address there on the screen, macamaclive@mc-mc.com, and we can put you in touch with someone that can answer your questions directly. Just be sure to let us know the title of the virtual lunch and learn that you attended when you reach out at that email. All right, remember to subscribe to the McNaughton-McKay YouTube channel for more industry content like this, and we look forward to seeing you all live again soon. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.